Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful, Rabbit Hole, King DL, Lauren Frey, Grim Clover, Internet Blood Sports, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. One of the things I think a lot of people are beginning to accept about the modern gaming industry is that everything is fucking terrible. Like everything is just atrocious. There's nothing coming out. There's nothing to play. There's nothing to be excited for. Like all of these studios, from Namco Bandai to Konami to Square Enix to Capcom to Sega to Activision Blizzard to Microsoft Studios to Naughty Dog, like all of them have gone completely downhill, down to the toilet like the turds that they are. Now, there is one very notable exception, and that is like Nintendo. But for the but for the vast majority of the gaming industry, like most fans, and I think even most journalists, even are starting to slowly admit this, is that we are in a gaming dark age. Everything coming out does looks terrible. Nobody is excited for any of it, and the cracks are really beginning to show. Right? People were pointing this out from like I started noticing this stuff in like 2009 during the peak of the Wii era popularity, in which people were like writing this off and we're writing the Wii off in favor of like the PlayStation 3 and 360 for no real reason. Most people began to notice there was a problem with Gamergate, and now it seems that like there is now this feeling, this consensus has now gone mainstream, is that games are not as good as they used to be. And they can't even come close. Like, I have no faith in any of these companies to put out a product that I would be interested in. Like, I don't care if it's like a new Final Fantasy game. I don't care if it's a new Metal Gear Solid. I don't care if it's a new Sonic the Hedgehog. I don't care if it's a new Silent Hill or Resident Evil or like any of these other juggernaut franchises. Like, when you get right down to it, all of these games have something critically wrong with them that prevents me from even considering picking them up. Right? There are all these barriers, there are all these like issues I have with them, and I would rather stay at home, play on my Switch, and like pick up something like Yeast. Like Yeast 9 has been fantastic, or like Triangle Strategy, or Kirby in the Forgotten Land, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Splatoon 3 is coming out in like 3 days. Like Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is better than like anything Bethesda has made in years. Like it's it's become like evidently clear to me and like basically every other person in this sphere is that like the days of saying that third party developers are pushing this industry forward, that they're cutting edge, that they're destroying Nintendo, that you're going to put Nintendo out of business. It's over. Like if you're enthusiastic about gaming at all, like if you have any optimism for the future of like the industry or anything, you're either Nintendo exclusive or you're a paid shill for some kind of company, right? We saw this with like multiverses, with YouTubers coming out and saying it was like the best fighting game they've ever played or some shit, like way better than those other mascot fighter platformers. Like you've seen people like pretend to be excited about uh Horizon Forbidden West. Like you've seen this decline over the past 5 years, and it's going to get even worse, I think. Because the thing I've noticing is that we are at the point where I think people are just not buying the big new hype products. Right back in 2017, I think Horizon Zero Dawn legitimately sold itself on being like a brand new IP from Sony that was going to be radically different than anything else that was out there, with this completely new, fresh concept of like fighting robot dinosaurs. And by the time the sequel rolled around, nobody cared anymore. Like The Last of Us Part 2, like destroyed the Last of Us brand, right? Like companies are stuck in this very, very rough place where they can't make anything new because they don't have the talent to make anything new or interesting, but they also, for the first time ever, cannot rely on their pre-established legacy franchises because they've done nothing but fuck with them for their entire lifespan, right? Like there was no reason for Konami to fuck over like Egum, right? There was no reason for Yakuza not to be on Nintendo as well, right? There was no reason for this to refuse to make a Chrono Trigger sequel, to like refuse to make like new interesting RPGs in general, right? Like if there's anything good coming from these companies, like low budget re-releases or new IPs, they're very low budget and they're not given all that much focus, right? Bravely Default, like you can say a lot about Bravely Default, but I think it's safe to say that it was better than any Final Fantasy that's come out before around that period or after it, right? Triangle Strategy was great. Octopath Traveler was great. Like there are good games being made, but all of them are like low budget from teams that are very passionate about what they're doing. Like the big AAA productions that like get the masses excited and like trick them into buying hardware they don't need. Like those games simply are not getting made, and they're not going to be made. Like it's taking like about a decade for a lot of these games to come out. Like Witcher 3 came out in 2015, right? CD Projekt Red is legit going to have to like build The Witcher 4 like from nothing, from like the Cyberpunk 2017, from nothing to try and salvage their reputation and release it a decade after it came out. Like people are complaining about Breath of the Wild 2 taking a long time. Imagine being a Witcher 3 fan and having to wait like a decade for The Witcher 3 2, a game that is guaranteed, guaranteed to not be as popular as the first game. Right? Like it is becoming a big mess seeing the state of the industry. People aren't buying microtransactions anymore. Like battle passes aren't super popular. The Marvel Adventures game couldn't get people to like sign on to Gas. Like Gas was supposed to be the next big thing, but like the gaming community has like outright rejected it, right? Like Gotham Knights. All I see when people talk about Gotham Knights is how much they hate the fact it is an Arkham 4, right? Like people are making excuses for it. People are saying that like, oh, it's a different genre. It's more like an action RPG. It's not meant to be like an Arkham game. But the thing is, it's alienated their audience. They can't make any changes to their properties at all without alienating like the masses. And they can't keep things the same because more and more people are like realizing that this stuff is the same thing over and over and over and over again. Right? Like I don't think Assassin's Creed got worse. I think people just began to understand what makes the franchise so terrible, right? Like it was just not that good to begin with. But people are now beginning to wake up to that fact. And now companies like Ubisoft have nothing to fall back on. There is nothing that's going to there is nothing they can do to make a new IP that'll like excite the masses and get them fired up to for the next big thing. It's over, right? People are not buying PlayStation 5s or Xbox Series X's. Like, if anyone is buying a new video game console, it is a Nintendo Switch. It is for Zelda. It is for Mario Odyssey. It is for ARMS. It is for Xenoblade. It is for Splatoon 3. Yeah, I'm sure there are people who picked it up for like Octopath Traveler, right? Like I know people who are like very very enthusiastic about that game, right? Like I'm very enthusiastic about that game. Like I find myself like more and more just feeling like Nintendo has won the console war, and like the industry that exists purely to sell you on PlayStation and Xboxes. They're not handling it very well. They don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit it's true because like without PlayStation and Microsoft, they're going to like see a huge decline in revenue, right? We're going to return to the age where people like actually played games because they enjoyed them and not because they were like the hot new thing. You know what I mean? Like people would actually talk about the games that come out instead of like making some arbitrary argument about like whether I don't know, like Final Fantasy X was better than Wind Waker or whatever, like Super Smash Bros. Melee, whatever the weird comparisons were back in the day. All I ever heard growing up was like how much more popular the PS2 was, how it had way better games, and like it wasn't until I was way older and could actually like pick up all of these games that I realized that like the GameCube and the Xbox were better all along. And I'm just kind of curious just how long that mindset is going to continue because it really does feel like it's a dying trend. Like the age of saying that like PlayStation destroyed Nintendo is over, right? Nintendo is not going to be driven out of the console industry. They're not going to die. They're not going to be bankrupt. They're not going to be acquired by PlayStation. They are going to continue dominating until in their niche forever.